Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Nine, and thank you for joining us. After a marathon week of public testimony against the president, it remains unclear if that was the end of hearings. Democrats must now decide how to move forward and how quickly, after hearing several witnesses describe a pressure campaign aimed at getting Ukraine to investigate the president's political rival, Joe Biden. The president, however, says it's all a sham and that he has done nothing wrong. Meanwhile, there have been several fast-moving developments related to the inquiry. An associate of Rudy Giuliani's is reportedly willing to testify that Republican Congressman Devin Nunes met with Ukraine's former prosecutor in an effort to get dirt on Joe Biden. Nunes denies the claim. And new documents released from the State Department overnight through the Freedom of Information Act appear to further tie Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and show contacts between the two men in the lead up to the removal of Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. The president this weekend has no public events on his schedule, but has tweeted his displeasure with the inquiry. He wrote, quote, "Adam Schiff will be compelled to testify should the Democrats decide, despite the fact that my presidential conversations were totally appropriate, perfect, to go forward with the impeachment hoax. Polls have now turned very strong against impeachment." For more, I want to bring in Paula Reid, Sean Sullivan, and Jessica Levinson. Paula is a CBS News White House correspondent. Sean's a CBSN political contributor and national politics reporter for The Washington Post. And Jessica is a professor at Loyola Law School. So, Jessica, I want to start with you. You know, with these new developments, we have Congressman Nunes has been one of the president's strongest supporters during this inquiry. He was right there during those public testimonies. What do we make of this reporting that he suggests that he himself tried to also get dirt on Joe Biden?
Well, I think what we make of it is that it's deeply ironic that he has complained about the lack of transparency in this process. And here's something that I think would be incredibly useful for the American public to know. If you look at Representative Nunes, what he's been arguing and what he allegedly has been involved in, I think that at the very least, this is something that should have been disclosed before he took part in the impeachment inquiry. And at most, frankly, he should have recused himself. This is something where it sounds like he has a direct conflict of interest. But it's the type of thing where if you look at the purpose behind disclosure, it's to give the public information to evaluate the credibility of either a proceeding or a person. This goes to the heart of that necessity. I
want to turn now to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The State Department was forced to release new documents because of an ethics watchdog group. It's called American Oversight. And overnight, they had a court order. They were required to turn these over because of the Freedom of Information Act. So the group says that these documents reveal a clear paper trail from Rudy Giuliani to the Oval Office to Secretary Pompeo to facilitate Giuliani's smear campaign against U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. These are the words of the executive director of this group. You know, at this point, Sean, how does this implicate Pompeo?
Well, right now, when you look at Secretary Pompeo, there's a couple things that you have to consider. One is, where does he fit into this impeachment process as it moves forward? We're seeing both from these documents that you mentioned and from testimony that there are allegations that he is potentially closer to the situation regarding Ukraine than might have previously been known. The other thing to keep in mind right now is that Secretary Pompeo is under a lot of pressure from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his allies to run for the Senate, to leave his post at some point as Secretary of State, return to Kansas, which is his home state, and run for a really, really crucial Kansas Senate seat, which he is still right now considering actively.
And the president publicly voiced support for this yesterday on Fox and Friends.
Yeah, and so what you have to look at is, number one, how will this affect his thinking about potentially doing that? We don't know that yet. Is this something, are these revelations things that potentially Democrats or even Republican rivals could use against him if he runs? Is this the type of thing that would make him more or less likely to want to leave his post? So this just opens up a box of more questions, not just about the impeachment process, but really about the political and professional future of the president's top diplomat.
You know, Sean, the sense was, once these public hearings had ended on Thursday, that the House was going to move forward to deciding these articles of impeachment. Do you think that delays that at this point? Do you think that they want to potentially hold more hearings on this, or do you think they have enough? Are you hearing from folks on Capitol Hill?
Well, we don't know right now exactly how they're going to move forward. What we do know is that this is sort of the end of the hearings and the testimony that had formally been announced that we knew was coming in the last few days. And certainly it has been an extraordinary few days on Capitol Hill with the testimony that we've seen. The question now for House Democratic leaders is, do they want to bring more witnesses? Do they want to hold more hearings? Or should they move the process forward, and should the process now move to the House Judiciary Committee, which is who would have jurisdiction over actually filing and drafting articles of impeachment? But what Democrats are looking right now is not just the legal case itself that they're trying to present, but they're also trying to make a larger case to the American people to justify why they have been doing this. They are careful, they have been saying, to not make this look like an overtly political exercise, and they have to convince the American people that that's what they're doing. So if they feel like they've done that, then I think we'll see them move forward. If they don't feel like they've done that, then we might see more of these witnesses come forward.
Paul, we know the president has been meeting with several Senate Republicans as this trial has been unfolding. How is it going as far as support goes? How does the White House feel about that with Republicans?
Well, they're concerned enough that this week they invited a group of Republican lawmakers here to the White House to talk about how they may be able to shift this process in a way that could be more favorable to the president. While the president has tried to put a positive spin on this week's events and insists that he wants a trial, White House officials tell me they do expect that he will likely be impeached in the House. That means there'll be a Senate trial, but they don't know exactly what that will look like. So they're trying to come up with ideas in a way that they could possibly shift this trial's focus to the Bidens, to Adam Schiff, to anyone but President Trump.
Jessica, the fact that we know we've got this new reporting about Nunes, potentially this associate close to Rudy Giuliani, who's under pressure with the law, potentially the lawyer saying he's willing to talk about this connection with Nunes going to Europe to get dirt on Biden. How concerned should Nunes be about this?
Well, I mean, the true answer is we don't know. So we don't know if he was just on a political mission, if he was essentially trying to carry water for someone else, or if he actually engaged in some sort of wrongdoing. What type of wrongdoing would we talk about here? We could think about federal election laws, where if he's trying to ask for a thing of value for a political campaign, that would violate campaign finance laws. We could also look at honest services laws. There's a number of different statutes that we could look at that go beyond the kind of bucket of misuse of power. So how much trouble is he in? I think we should always be circumspect before we actually hear the testimony to determine what exactly his legal exposure could be. We do know that you can indict a sitting congressman, even if you can't indict a sitting president.
And based on the testimony we've heard this week, what do you think the charges are that the House could draft up?
So I think there's going to be two different buckets of charges. So I think the first will be on the substantive crimes. So you'll see charges based on, as I mentioned, campaign finance laws, election laws. You could see charges based on bribery or extortion. And then there'll be a second bucket of charges that are basically impeaching based on thwarting the impeachment, by which I mean, telling people not to comply with subpoenas, witness intimidation. So those would fall within a kind of second door of obstruction of justice type charges. And I think that the House ultimately will decide to go with both of those big categories.
Paul, we know that National Security Advisor John Bolton was able to get his Twitter account back, and he said on Twitter that he was re-engaged, and not that he was re-engaged with Twitter. But when it comes to actually being on Bolton's side of the story, is there any movement going forward? Where are we? Do we expect to hear from him more?
Well, I think that we should hear from him more. So if you look at the witnesses who testified, who came forward and said, it's not only my legal obligation, but it's my moral obligation. If you listen to what they said about John Bolton increasingly being a key player in that story, it would be important to hear from him. Now, there's some ongoing lawsuits that essentially ask judges to determine if the executive, meaning the president, tells you not to comply with a subpoena, but Congress issues a subpoena. What should you do? I think John Bolton, there's a case that's going to be coming out Monday afternoon. I think he'll be looking at that case. But it is better to tell your story under oath to the appropriate congressional committee as opposed to using social media to do so.
Paula, I want to get you to weigh in as well.
Well, as she just said, they're waiting for a case on Monday, which will likely decide whether we will hear from the former national security advisor. His attorney has teased that his client has details that so far have not been revealed. So even though Adam Schiff has said he doesn't want to hold up all of the proceedings to hold more hearings, he may make an exception for this specific witness.
All right, Paula Reid, Jessica Levinson, and Sean Sullivan, I want to thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.